We're doing
Oh,
mock.
we're going to call this meeting to order, it being 6 o'clock, and I can't keep track of who's doing this, but John, how about the pledge? Whoa, he's the chair.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first off, we're going to approve the minutes of prior meetings. I have the non-public and work session minutes of March 14th. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes?
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
And then we have the regular meeting minutes of March 14th.
Make a motion, we accept them as written.
All right, by John, second by
Second.
Neil. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that takes care of that. And that's all we have for meeting minutes. The next meetings of the Select Board will be Monday, April 11th, and on Monday, April 25th. And as always, our work review sessions are prior to the meeting at 5 p.m., and everybody's welcome to come if you'd like. Weather observations for the month of February are available in the Town Hall. Citizens wishing to be listed on the agenda should notify the Town Hall before noon, the Friday before a scheduled meeting. And road bans are in effect through May 1 of this year. We have a few requested appointments. The first is from Steve Whitman to be reappointed to the Planning Board, and he's written us a letter which just says, "I'm writing to request a nomination to continue serving the Plymouth Planning Board as an alternate. My time has been enjoyable, and I hope to continue to serve in this capacity. Please consider me for a 3-year term. I am unable to serve as a full member because my primary work is as a planning consultant assisting other towns, but my attendance record reflects significant participation. Thank you for your consideration." So we have Steve Whitman's request for a 3-year appointment to the Planning Board as an alternate. We have a motion to accept that.
So moved.
Second. All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
I can vouch for his significant participation. on the
He's
plan.
there all the time,
Yeah,
isn't
he is.
he? Yeah. Yeah, he's knowledgeable too, so that's good. So we have the appointment of Steve Whitman, which we can sign right here. I guess we might as well just move along while that's happening. We've also got a request by Paul Estes to be reappointed to the Conservation Commission, but as an alternate instead of a voting member. Well, actually, he's saying his term expires this year. Does that mean it's up? So this is a reappointment for 3 years as an alternate?
Yes.
Okay. So, do we have a motion? My term expires this year. I have very much enjoyed my participation, but it is time for me to slow down. With that in mind, I'd like to change my status to alternate instead of full voting member. Please consider this letter as my request. So,
I move that we appoint Paul Estes as an alternate to the Conservation Commission.
I second that.
all right, if there's any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
I think that's a unanimous vote. And then we're back to the Energy Commission, and we have a request from Peter Martin, who wrote a shorter letter which just says, "I request that the board reappoint me to the Plymouth Energy Commission." We have a motion on that
I move that we appoint Peter Martin to the Plymouth Energy Commission.
by Bill,
Second.
second by Neil. All those in favor?
Aye.
I think that's a unanimous vote. That takes care of that. Here's another one, does a good job. Joe? Joe's on the top of page 2, and we're already there. Joe has
KV Partners, it's our engineer,
right.
working on Highland Street.
Oh, nice, yeah.
So it's, this is not the final, but we're closing in on it. We've made a lot of progress. We got one section left, we're trying to realign Reservoir and Old Ward Bridge.
Mhm.
So he's just doing some stuff there, but we're.
You got room after.
Oh, that's why I got him doing it. Let him figure it out.
All right, so you're looking for $5,076 to pay KV Partners for their
Right.
most recent work on the Highland Street repaving or reconstruction, right?
Correct.
And it looks like, from this, it looks like maybe this is,
Last payment, or 75% payment. Yeah, it's the last
well, this
payment.
is prior 75, current 15, but that's not 15% of that. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so we're at 90% total, it looks like. Oh, I see, there'll be,
Yeah, we're getting near the end.
yeah, there'll be about another $5,000 or something. All right, so do we have a motion to approve this payment?
I move that we approve this payment to KV Partners.
Second.
All right, so motion by Neil, seconded by Mike. All those in favor? if there's
Aye.
no
Aye.
opposition? Sounds like,
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
thanks, Joe. Sign
Good
this
luck
on
with
this.
Reservoir and Old Ward Bridge.
Yeah, you're gonna need easements or something.
Yeah. What's yours? Wow, that's crystal clear.
And then, we had this on our work session agenda, but decided, since we were out of time anyway, to talk about it here. Mike Ahern attended, what was this, the pre-hearing conference?
Trying to figure out how they're going to run. The SEC is trying to figure out how they're going to hold the hearings. So I was able to make it by about 11 or so. I think the meeting started at 9. Maggie Mumford was also at that pre-hearing. There was 161 interveners that filed with the SEC. So we're one of the 161. And rather than holding a separate hearing for each one of the interveners, they decided the most expedient way to do this is to lump all those interveners into 3 groups. And there was a lot of discussion about it, and each intervener got a chance to speak. And I don't think there was too many people in favor of that grouping process, but there were a lot of attorneys representing municipalities and individuals, and they were pointing out to the SEC that if they're representing 2 or 3 or 4 communities and they're in that group, they couldn't speak for the group if they're being paid by the municipality. And the SEC would like to have 1 spokesperson or maybe 2 from each group, which just didn't work for the attorneys to be able to represent. So it was, I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I'm assuming that they're taking, they took a lot of notes, and I'm assuming that they're getting a lot of response that it's not going to work, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think that the reason why they're trying to group everybody together is to accelerate the approval process?
Right, the state, the SEC has one process to hear something like this, and whether it's a small little development or project that needs to go forward, or whether it's something like this. The state has never seen anything like this that goes through as many communities and as many interveners. So they've got only one process that works, and the time frame, whether there's 2 or 3 interveners or 161, the process and the time frame is the exact same. I think it's a year or less. So they want to be done, the hearings, by December, and there's absolutely no way, if they were to hold these individually, that they could fit it all in. And the Northern Pass would like this done in the time frame that the state allows. And they said that there's some flexibility, but from what I could gather, they have absolutely little flexibility because they want to get this forced through as quickly as they can.
So I think there was an order, well, did you, I thought you were raising your, well, I think we could have some public comment if you'd like, sure, because you were there and we're talking about it, so.
I have a copy of the PowerPoint. I don't know if you were able to get this. You do, okay. Of the timeframe, and a couple of points on it. There is an RSA that says the process has to be done in 365 days, but the counsel from the applicant's submission, counsel for the public, Peter Roth, notes that that's hardly ever been adhered to before. So now there are 3 different proposed procedural schedules that are out there. The applicants, Peter Roth's applicants is a year, Peter Roth's is a year and a half, and SPINIF, Society for the Protection of New Hampshire Forests, is 2 years. And so right now is the time frame in which any of the interveners or intervener groups can submit a position statement in terms of which schedule you would like to support or propose your own. And the deadline for that is April 7th. The deadline, sorry.
No, I was just going to add to what Maggie was saying. You know, my email's
Right.
repository for that, for Plymouth, the town, is intervener, and I'm only sending you half what I said. I mean, I'm cleaning through, and it has been overwhelmingly, the interveners overwhelmingly against this arbitrary 12-month time frame and petitioning for either 18 months or up to the 24 months as proposed by SPINIF, CLF, I forget who else is on there, but conservation entities. So, you know, just for public opinion, that's what's coming in.
Yeah, interesting, yeah.
Part of it is that if you look at the applicant's proposed schedule, there is a 2-week time frame after the actual decision of what group you're going to be stuck with or be in until all of your requests for discovery, all of your discovery questions have to be submitted to the applicant. And so that's just one time frame that people don't even know which group they're going to be.
So you could have a group of 20 or 30 or some number of individuals or entities that would have 2 weeks to get together and decide.
With a limit of 50 questions.
Wow.
You know, per intervener.
Well, I also saw a bunch of objections to the groupings.
Right, well that, today at 4:30 was the deadline for appealing or a request for review of whatever grouping you're in. So the municipality of Plymouth is now by default grouped with the middle region municipalities, I think.
Yes.
It's Franconia all the way down to
Right,
Bristol,
right.
I
Skips the
believe.
notch, and then we're included in
Right,
it.
no, it doesn't go down to Bristol. It's basically who's above ground and who's underground.
Oh, okay.
So there are 3, there's the northern, the middle, and the southern. And
So we're the
Plymouth is-
southern group,
No, you're in the middle.
Oh, the middle group,
Municipalities
okay.
In the middle group.
But it's
So
the underground.
Franconia to Plymouth, and then Ashland and below, because it's slated, as proposed by the applicant, is slated to come out of the ground right south of Ahern's on Route 3.
Oh, really? Oh, I thought it went, well, I guess that's Bridgewater, yeah, right,
Yeah.
okay. Is it like at the Bridgewater line, more or less? Or?
It's just south of the power plant at the,
Oh, okay.
just to the west of where the river crosses the Pemmy. Not at the current site, not at the current transformer location, but across the street from that. Well, actually, both sides of the street.
So the towers would be starting again
Right down
right
Janus
there?
Right there, right, yes. Yeah, right at Janus Road.
Okay.
The tubes.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the deadline that's today. There are there's several other deadlines coming up, right up.
So the meeting you went to was sort of a public hearing on what that order was going to say in terms of the grouping, and they've since produced that order, which is what we're talking about, people either appealing or commenting on. Is that?
Yeah, they went through, they must have talked for an hour trying to get the dates. It was a mess as far as, no one, I don't think anybody left knowing what the dates exactly were. It was very messy. And the question came up, what are the deadlines? And the deadlines, whether they included the weekends or whether they included,
How the
yeah,
times
it seemed like everything was moving constantly.
But
Yeah.
the firm deadline is that the 7th to submit your written position on the timeline. And also, if there are any objections to the applicant's request for rule waivers, which apparently is a huge issue, as in decommissioning. They might not have to decommission, and if their request for a waiver is granted. And also, any objection to their request for protection of their information, being economic information. So those are two motions that the applicant has put in, that objections to those motions are being accepted up until April.
So do those motions appear in the public record on the SEC site?
Yes, I think they were filed as late as, I think they were February 26th.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, I think that's when.
And tell us again, they're motions to what? I didn't quite,
To waive some of the rules, as in,
okay.
an example was given of the need for decommissioning, which, so essentially, the need to take out the old towers and dispose of them.
Sort of like the question that's come up with the wind towers too,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Yeah. Or the nuclear power plant, for that matter, remember?
But I
And-
don't know how many other issues there are. I have not had a chance to
Right, that was just an
review those.
example. But, and did you say there was another applicant pending motion?
Yes. They filed no economic cost and benefit information. It was listed as an empty appendix. And so there have been objections to that. But in the meantime, the applicant is also saying that they're willing to file a redacted economic statement. And that is due today.
I have a copy of it, and it's from an economic development entity out of Boston. It's heavily redacted. It's 100 and some odd pages. I just barely skimmed a little of it today. It's mind-boggling.
I'm not sure whether Franconia requested that the SEC look at them separately, because the power line is proposed to go through their center of their commerce and their town, similar to Plymouth. We're probably the only two communities that it goes through the downtown, which I did talk with Chris briefly at the meeting, and it seemed, but from what I understand, the deadline to say, look at Franconia and Plymouth separately from the entire rest of the groups, make us a fourth group.
Was today, I think, according to that.
Yeah.
There are people filing out of time requests for different groupings and as interveners, because the request to be an intervener was due a while back. However, after that, then there was the submission of additional information by the applicant saying that the alternate route is now the Holderness above ground route in this central region. So now people from Holderness are trying to get back on as interveners because there have been overlapping deadlines. So there's still.
Prioritization keeps jumping around, so there's all this follow-up and lag. So it's a real boondoggle already. Yeah.
But I think what I came away with for the town is that even if there are negotiations underway with Northern Pass by the municipality in terms of trying to develop conditions and stipulations, that if they're awarded a certificate, that you have certain conditions and stipulations, you can still be an intervener and still be opposed to the project, but be trying to figure out what stipulations you want in there. But there's an absolute drop-dead deadline of any stipulations that you feel are incredibly important for the town. They need to be included in the pre-trial filing. If they're not included in that, then the SEC doesn't include them in part of their proceedings. And then it's totally on the town to try to negotiate. If it's part of the SEC process, then you have the backing of the SEC for enforcement. That was one of the big takeaways that I got from the meeting for the municipality.
Is there a time limit on that as well? Or what is that time limit?
It depends on what overall schedule is accepted, but by the tentative schedule, the 365-day schedule that's put out, that the applicant's requesting, it's listed, and my guess is probably, I don't know, late July would be my guess, but I'm not sure. So essentially you have to
Concur, even if you have your intervener status because you're not sold on the project, you also need to be making up your contingencies at the same time. So it's a real mixed bag of.
When you say contingencies.
Well, your requirements were the process were the application to be approved and the project go through. So you have to be working both sides of the aisle, so to speak, at the same time.
I'm not sure I understood that, but I'm getting the impression that if you have if you've either made some kind of arrangement with them and/or you have some sort of specific requirements or needs for the town, that's the kind of thing I will get on board if, something like that.
I wouldn't say I would get on board with him, but if you want the SEC to know that this is the most important thing for our town in terms of if this project goes through.
For it to be approved.
Yes,
okay.
and most interveners are against the project.
Right.
And my take from your public statement is that the town of Plymouth is against it. But if you want the SEC backing you in terms of enforcement for if the project goes through, then the SEC needs to be aware of what you feel your stipulations should be. But since you're bound into an intervener group, and theoretically those interveners only have one spokesperson, you need to be in communication with all of the other underground site interveners.
Otherwise, any enforcement would be the cost of the, we won't call it litigation, but the legal assistance would be all on the town, and it would be pretty significant.
So to me, it's pretty important to get on board with the process, even though I totally agree with Mike, it was chaos.
One thing that I took away was there was a lot of knowledgeable people there that spoke really well, representing the people against it. And Plymouth is a newcomer only because the proposed route did not go through Plymouth until very recently. So now we're thrust into the middle of it. We're probably one of the latest towns to be added to the route, so.
And if I can add for the record,
Yes.
that I was at this meeting as the unofficial representative of the Webster family, which is in the southern group of non-abutters based on property holdings in Bridgewater. So just so you know, that was my role at the meeting.
Yep.
One thing that was pretty interesting, some of the interveners talked and said, it's hard enough just to get certain boards in the community, the planning board, the zoning board, and the select board to get together and agree. But now, not only that, but now we've got many communities in their select boards, their zoning boards, and planning boards, all, and then they've, not only do those boards within the community have to meet and discuss, but then the communities all have to be able to discuss and meet, and there's no time to do all that. There's very little time, and it's chaos times 10.
Do we have
part
a
of-
deadline now?
With your intervenor group, that you would like to move for something, you need to get on board with your intervenor group, and then it has to go out to all of the parties. And then they have to be able to either concur or disagree or not have an opinion. And then you can file your motion indicating how many of the other parties, which is the 26 different abutting or different intervenor groups. So it's a huge process. You don't have to go through that process if you're objecting to something or filing a position statement. But it's still a pretty cumbersome process.
Do we have a deadline that we have to meet before our next meeting?
No, I don't think so. I think what one thing I heard Maggie say was she doesn't know the date for the time by which we have to register whatever issues we have with the SEC, a stipulation in some form, but it's a ways out probably.
Yeah, but that would be as formal pretrial testimony, that has to be filed. And there is a date, April 7th. If there's anything in the proposed waiver of rules that applies to clean up after digging up the town, or anything like that, April 7th is that due date.
That's less than 2 weeks.
Wait, what is that?
The
For our
applicant,
next meeting,
I know.
No, you do it.
I think
the applicant has
decommission.
put forward two motions.
Right.
One is a request for waiver of rules, and apparently that's a massive request, but I have not reviewed those specific rules.
Okay,
And the other is a request for protective treatment on their remaining
financial.
economic information, which they do not
And
want
you
to
said the
divulge.
date to object to those motions is April
April
7th.
7th.
Okay,
yes.
I understand.
That is also the date, the deadline for submitting your written statement of position on the proposed procedural scheduling, which is the 365-day RSA mandated scheduling. But it can be waived. There is another RSA to deal with that.
The only thing they've had close to this was Seabrook back in the 70s, they said, and this is bigger than that as far as.
Did we have an SEC back then? I think that was at the PUC. Well, I don't really know that.
And they are going to try to have an SEC meeting on the 11th to try to deal with the groupings issue. Because the biggest objection was, how can we have a spokesperson for our group if we don't know which group we're in? And so you're supposed to, as interveners, be sorting out within your group who will be the spokesperson.
Right.
And the strong recommendation was for each intervener to have legal counsel.
Sounds like a nightmare.
Bruce Ahern was also at the meeting. He's got a water line that goes from one side of the road to the other to get to his barn. And if they're going through, he's worried that he might not have the water going back and forth anymore. I have water going back and forth as well, and if you ever have to repair it, there's just a lot of issues working with that kind of voltage in the ground.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's also the heat, too. I'm seeing it was like, what was it, 150 degrees, something like that, on top of the...
Oh, wow.
Maybe you won't need
You
a
won't
hot
have
water.
to plow that road anymore.
All right, anything else on that? Thank you, Maggie and Mike.
Thanks, Maggie.
And I guess on a somewhat related issue, we were also going to bring up roads. Yeah, legislation. Thank you for filling in that blank, Bill.
So, actually, last year, there was a bill that went into the House. The prime sponsor was Suzanne Smith of Hebron. And House Bill 626 was, brought forward to, and actually was like a lot of bipartisan support. It was Suzanne Smith, Martha Clark, Senator Martha Clark, Representative Gene Chandler, Representative Rebecca Brown, Senator Jeb Bradley, the Republican, actually Gene Chandler's a Republican as well, Representative Susan Ford, a Democrat, Representative Howard Moffett, Democrat, and Senator Jeannie Forrester, a Republican. So a lot of bipartisan support. It didn't make it through the legislature last year, but it was brought up again this year. And it passed the House March 23rd. And from there it goes to the Senate for hearing. And conveniently, this bill, House Bill 626, is sponsored by several senators as well. But what the bill does, which I haven't really kind of described yet, is allow energy developers to site underground actually underground is spelled too, high voltage electric transmission lines in designated state-owned transportation corridors such as Interstates 89 or 93 in return for lease payments. So should this bill pass the Senate as well, this would provide kind of a straight shot for a developer like Northern Pass to have a underground landscape, a corridor, to bring its power down to Franklin. And it's not a mandatory outcome. You know, should this pass, I don't think Northern Pass would be required to do so. But it certainly would be more convenient for all the communities involved, and it would be terminus to terminus underground project. So, you know, well, as of today, there's no scheduled hearing in the Senate, but if you're in support of this legislation, you should check the Legislative Services website and maybe offer support to your senator if you'd like this bill to pass. And that's where that stands.
That's good, good information. Oop, I'm on all right, does anybody have any comments on what Bill had to say? All right. And then we're going to announce our new committee assignments. We did this in our work session. We decided the following in no particular order, and I just happen to be at the top of the list here, but this list says that I am going to be the Select Board rep to the Water and Sewer Commission for the next year. Bill Bolton for the Planning Board. Mike Ahern is going to be the alternate for the Planning Board. Mike Ahern is going to be Chamber of Commerce. Neil is going to do College Community Council. John Randlett is going to be the School District Rep. Bill Bolton, by request, is going to be on the Energy Commission, or is going to be the rep to the Energy Commission. I'm going to be on the Ambulance Committee, which doesn't meet very often, I understand, but nonetheless. Neil, the Conservation Commission. John Randlett, I hate to tell you this, I wrote John Tucker here. I don't know how that
You
happened.
could have gone without that.
Hope he's not watching.
John Tucker?
Yeah. Capital Improvement / Budget Committee. We actually talked about the Pemi River Local Advisory Commission. Bill volunteered for that, but we talked a little bit about Maggie Mumford just before she walked in the door, because I understand she's got some interest in that.
I don't think I will be able to accept that at this time. I have interest, and I will be trying to go to a meeting now and
Okay.
again. But
I'm going to just
I
cross your
appreciate it.
name right off here. That's fine.
We'll just leave it there, just, you know.
Yeah.
tilde
And
or
then
something.
Neil volunteered to be North Country Council, and that's the end of that list. And I don't have anything else here, do I? I think. Anybody have any new business, old business, unfinished business?
Got a report.
Oh, committee reports, yeah, committee reports. I skipped right over. Well, I let you guys do yours under committee reports, but I guess the question would be,
Oh,
yeah, any other committee reports or any real committee reports?
I attended the,
I figured you'd had something.
I attended the Energy Commission
Oh, yeah, okay.
as your guest. You invited me. I was before I was appointed to the.
Right.
But there wasn't a quorum, so we didn't really have like a true meeting. But we talked about revisiting the co-op lighting project, 43-watt LEDs. Also, the power purchase agreement with the solar array. You know, the focus on that is to, I guess, well, we already went into a contract with a different energy provider for the next year, but in following years, we might have maybe even a bigger project to go forward with, depending upon location and cost.
Okay.
And
I attended a recent meeting of the North Country Council Transportation Committee, and we discussed policies and procedures and funding for projects.
Okay.
Nothing.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything new, I don't think.
got one more thing.
Oh, yes, Bill.
I'm on a roll here. So, some of you may have seen like a card that you received in the mail, if you're a Plymouth voter, to invite you to take the online version of the county community survey, which would aid the planning board to formulate a master plan. And if you haven't yet, the deadline for this particular round is March 31st. So please take advantage of that
This
invitation.
But not to interrupt, but is this a different form than?
Same form.
It's the same one.
Same form, different target dates, depending on which group you are. And I just went in there and took a look at the data. There have already been 728 respondents to the questionnaire. So, yeah, we're getting a ton of data.
128.
No,
728.
You think people are doing it 2 or 3 times?
Well, I did it 5. No, I mean, only,
Yeah.
no, it'd be kind of like, you know, why would you want to? But
Right, yeah. So you're trying to, yeah. All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All right, Neil and Mike.
We,
Oh,
public comment.
we
Oh,
left
public
out
comment, Frank,
I'm sorry, Frank, I usually invite, you know, or
Yeah, you
remind
try to
them.
remind me, but,
I do have a couple comments.
yes, sir.
One, first dealing with Northern Pass and the fact that back 1995, we had the Green Street Committee and we were dealing with projects dealing with Green Street, one of which was to connect Green Street to Route 3. There was also various committees dealing with the railroad right-of-way bed to put in water and sewer to Ashland, which is a concepting. And they were also looking at the statewide multi-use trail, which was going to be positioned on the area that was improved by placing the water line, sewer line on the dirt side or west side of the railroad track that would allow for several things. Obviously, the statewide multi-use trail. Also, they were looking for, it was a point that it would be a good emergency access road for river emergencies and or train derailments and stuff like that. And it occurred to me, this Northern Pass thing, rather than coming down Main Street and tearing up historical elements of which I don't believe we want to get involved with, is that the railroad base is a pretty well specified base of material, and it does the least damage. It's owned by the state, and all of the intersecting points between rivers, railroads, and rock ledge are known elements, and it would do a lot of less disruption. In fact, it would probably improve our capability as a town to finish off the multi-use trail, which is stuck at the town highway garage area. And I think it would be to our benefit if we looked into what that committee's work undiscovered or uncovered back when they were formulating the concept of this Green Street project of '95. The other thing I want to talk about is the issue of trying to get an inventory of number of people per residence in the residential area. Part of that was obviously the codes and standards for the total number of people allowed within a house structure by zoning or planning board ordinances. You also have your fire and life safety code requirements, and the fact that in 2000-ish area we as a town voted to be into the International Building Code system,
which is, also works with the fire and life safety code systems. 2006, those two agencies' code systems got together. So the code system for one is the code system for the other. You're in compliance with both, because there wasn't technical problems there. The other part is everybody looks for inventorying the number of people within a structure, but the other thing that impacted that was parking. On-site parking regulations for each structure, to have on-site parking, because a lot of areas are so congested that the number of people who were in that residence couldn't effectively park safely and not on the front lawns, which we were trying to get away from, to comply with our parking ordinance. So you have one issue of life safety codes within a structure and what's permitted by land use permit, and then your parking ordinance, which deals with accessory use for the structure. That might be consideration of thinking on that line. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. All right, would someone like to renew his
I
motion?
move we adjourn.
All right. Neil.
Second again.
Second by Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are